This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha. Did your high school produce a student paper? If so, were you part of putting it together, including writing about topics relevant to you personally and important for your peers to understand better? For Elizabeth Franklin, who's a recent Parkway West High School graduate, the answer to all the above is yes. So much yes, in fact, that the Missouri Interscholastic Journalism Association named Franklin its 2024 Student Journalist of the Year. Elizabeth's goal was not that kind of recognition, but informing readers with her articles definitely was. And as a citizen not yet old enough to vote, working on the school paper was a form of civic participation and action. To share more about that, Elizabeth Franklin joins us to share how she arrived at that conviction. Elizabeth, welcome to St. Louis on the Air, and congratulations on the Missouri Student Journalist of the Year honors.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Very glad to have you here too. So I want to start by asking you about your hero, or rather your heroine, and that is civil rights activist and journalist Ida B. Wells. Elizabeth, why was Wells such a compelling figure when she and her story were introduced to you?
I think I was introduced to Ida B. Wells when I was maybe in 5th grade, and there was a project that we had to do on Black history figures. And I think one trait about Ida B. Wells that stood out to me was her intense bravery and her intense courage and her desire to do what is right. And so she is a journalist. She was a journalist as well. And I think that the courage that she showed, like even being chased out of the town that she was in because she was trying to speak and spread the truth, that is just so important to me. And I really think that that's had an impact on who I am today and the topics that I've chosen to report on as a student journalist.
Mm-hmm. And so 5th grade, we're talking like 11 years old?
11.
Okay,
yeah.
So there was some time before you got to high school. Mm-hmm. Was there anything about the timing, stuff that was going on maybe in your life or in the world that led to your decision to join the school newspaper when you got to be a freshman?
Yeah, I think that one of the most notable examples of an incident that happened that caused me to want to become an activist was the Michael Brown incident, which happened in 2014. So this actually happened a while before 5th grade. Mm-hmm. And I know that had an impact on the entire St. Louis community. And so that impact sort of just like rippled to me, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do yet about it because I'm not really one of those people who are going to be like on social media posting about it or one of those people who are necessarily at the forefront of a crowd with a bullhorn. But I did know that I wanted to write. And so my passion for writing kind of combined with everything that I had learned and everything I had seen from the tragedy of Michael Brown, that definitely led me to wanting to use writing as my power and utilize that as a means of activism.
Mm-hmm. So when you were introduced, again, to Ida B. Wells in 5th grade, were you going to school in West County, St. Louis, or were you still going to school somewhere close to where your family had lived in North City?
Yeah, so I actually was a part of the voluntary, I think it's an interdistrict choice corporation program, which was the desegregation program in St. Louis. So I grew up in St. Louis City until I was about maybe 12 or so, 6th grade. Mm. And then I moved out to the county, but that entire time I had been going to Parkway School District. So it was really, really interesting to me to like see the reactions of people who lived sort of far away from it. Meanwhile, my family lives in North County. We are all around Florissant and Ferguson and that sort of area. So it was really, really impactful to me, but it really wasn't so much for my classmates. And so I saw that there was a divide there that I couldn't really articulate at the time.
Right. So you ended up becoming part of the school paper.
Yes.
The Pathfinder. And it is now your alma mater, Parkway West High School. Congratulations on graduating. So in the 4 years that you spent at the paper, you actually wrote a piece that took inspiration from the personal experience that you were just talking about, your own kind of pathfinding, if you will. And one of those articles was titled Beyond the Statistics, taking a look at America's, quote, crime capital. And you wrote that piece when you were an opinions editor as a sophomore. And it was very much about the negative things that you just referred to earlier, the things that you heard your West St. Louis County classmates and some of the parents also saying about the city. I mean, what was it that made you think, like, this is something that I need to address straight on and to challenge, and then to do that in the form of a school newspaper article?
Yeah, for sure. I think that my freshman year, this starts with my freshman year, but there's a story that I wrote, and it was inspired by the real-life struggles of many of the VIC program students. And so when I wrote and published that article, I saw how impactful it was to the community and how many people saw that and were able to empathize with it or sympathize with it or relate to it. And so going back to the stereotypes story, I think it's called Beyond the Statistics, I wanted to go back to that. I wanted people to relate to it again. I wanted people to empathize it and sympathize with it again, because there are so many challenges that I feel like a lot of people have faced, a lot of Black students especially have faced in a predominantly white school and a predominantly white school district that aren't necessarily getting a lot of attention. And I definitely believe that this was an issue that was also, like I said, with the Michael Brown issue, that one was like, there was a divide that I noticed. And so I really wanted to report on it. I really wanted to talk about it. I really wanted to share these students and even these teachers' voices on how St. Louis is represented and how the representation of St. Louis is kind of dehumanized by even the people who live like really close to it.
What was that divide, Elizabeth?
So I think the divide was that myself and the other VIC program students, members, participants, we saw a different reality than people who actually like did not live in the city like we did. And so, you know, I knew like playgrounds, I knew a community, like a really tight-knit community. I lived in Old North, and we have been I know that there has been a lot of like restoration projects, and a lot of the community is banding together, but other people did not see that. And so it's just really about how the perception of St. Louis changes for people who live there versus people who don't live there. And I found what a lot of my classmates and a lot of teachers, even, and parents, what they were doing was they were dehumanizing the people who lived there, and they were terrified of anybody who did not look like them. And so I just think that that's a perception that needs to shift, because there are issues that St. Louis has. There are challenges that St. Louis has, but we're not going to solve those issues by dehumanizing the people who live there.
We're talking with Elizabeth Franklin. She's the 2024 Missouri Student Journalist of the Year. She's also chair of the St. Louis County Youth Advisory Council. Elizabeth is a recent graduate of Parkway West High School in St. Louis County and a rising freshman at Dillard University in New Orleans, Louisiana. Now, you took up the role of editor-in-chief of the Pathfinder your senior year. So that was a promotion, an advance in a lot of ways. And this past winter, you wrote about the Voluntary Interdistrict Choice Corporation Program, also known as VIC. And for those who are not familiar, that program, which aimed to desegregate schools by sending Black city students to suburban schools and suburban students to city magnet schools, actually had its last group of ninth graders start last August. So, Elizabeth, this piece was so well written. It's an example of deep dive, long form journalism that's becoming rarer in media. What was it about being able to do a piece like that that involved storytelling, talking with people about their in real life experiences through journalism, that taught you things that perhaps you didn't already know?
I think that one of the things that I love most about journalism is that with every person I talk to, with every person I interview, I learn just that much more about the world, and my world space expands just a little bit more. And so talking with people about their experiences, especially for a story that was, as you said, very, very long and very thorough, I wanted to really showcase the realities of the two sort of, not different schools, but the two sectors of schools. So I know I went to a preschool in the city. I went to Washington Montessori. And then I transferred out to Parkway. I transferred out to Claymont, which is in the Parkway School District. And I saw two staggeringly different realities in both of those areas. And then even just comparing with my cousins, those were two staggeringly different, like painfully different realities. And I know that I can use the power of the pen for good, and I wanted to showcase those realities and showcase the challenges and the impacts that those have on people.
Elizabeth, did you have to reach in and maybe out in your community to find Ida B. Wells' kind of courage in order to write stories the way that you were writing them, and for them to go out in a student newspaper, especially given what the climate has been around diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Oh, yeah. I definitely had to dig very deep, both into myself and then the people around me for support, because I would think, I'm sort of a blunt person, but I would think that educational equity would not be a topic that would be so divisive, but it actually very much is. And so is the VIC program. And I'm not saying that to discredit either side, but there were a lot of people who did not really understand the idea behind either of those articles. And there were a lot of people who did not fully comprehend the scope that we were trying to work with, that I was trying to work with.
So when you found out that you won this award, 2024 Missouri Student Journalist of the Year, how did that feel?
Oh, man, that was such an honor, because I had been working. The process is very thorough. So you had to do a participant had to do a lot of things. I think I had been working on it for a month, maybe 2 months. And during that time, I was going through I had to create a website, a portfolio, and then go through all 4 years of my journalism experience and sort of dig deep into that. And so it was really just an honor to have that work that I've been cultivating throughout the 4 years of my journalism career, my high school journalism career. It was really such an honor to have that recognized, and I am proud of myself, because I don't know if I thought I would be able to have this award when I was just starting out as a freshman. But now that I'm here and I've received the award, I'm very content, and I'm just so honored to have been a part of the experience.
We need to take a quick break, but we'll be back shortly to continue this conversation. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio.
If you have a smart speaker, you have access to the entire world of NPR and St. Louis Public Radio. All the latest news and all the captivating stories. Activate our voices with yours by telling your smart speaker to play St. Louis Public Radio.
Welcome back. Let's return to our conversation with Elizabeth Franklin. She's the 2024 Missouri Student Journalist of the Year. She's also chair of the St. Louis County Youth Advisory Council. Elizabeth is a recent graduate of Parkway West High School in St. Louis County and a rising freshman at Dillard University in New Orleans, Louisiana. So here at St. Louis Public Radio, we feel that what we're doing with journalism is a public service. And there's something else that you've been doing, which is another form of public service. You're the chair of the St. Louis County Youth Advisory Council. And that body, which consists of 15 members between the ages of 14 and 22, advises County Executive Sam Page, the County Council, and relevant county departments. So in other words, you and the other members of that council give guidance to grown folks who make important decisions that affect young people. But in general, Elizabeth, what do you think electeds, right, politicians, and older voters misunderstand about how younger folks and political engagement of youth, how that works?
So I think the Youth Advisory Council is super important because, like you said, when you mentioned the ages, a lot of the people who are on the council, they can't actually vote. And so they can't vote in local elections that actually impact the community where they live. And so being on that council allows them to have a voice for the youth across St. Louis and be that sort of voice that we can't represent with a ballot necessarily. And so it's just super important because on the Youth Advisory Council, we raise a lot of issues that are not necessarily being talked about or would not necessarily be known by grown adults that, run everything else. And so just being on the Youth Advisory Council and serving alongside these amazing 14 through 22-year-olds, it's been an amazing experience that I've loved to kind of do within the past couple of years. And then I think that's something that some adults might misunderstand about youth civic engagement is that it's easy to recognize one person or two young people who are making a difference. But the thing is, we all need to make a difference. I have a friend, her name is Precious Berry, and she's a activist in the local area. And so one of the things that she's brought up to me is that, and she also serves on the council as well. One of the things that she brought up to me is that we don't need a chair at the table. We need an entire table so that these youth can have a place to, raise issues and promote discussions that are thought-provoking and that will actually encapsulate the issues of St. Louis County area youth today.
Is there an example of something that as a student advisory council that you all have brought up as an issue and the adults in the room just had no idea or didn't quite understand things in a way that they needed to?
So that question brings me back to the first term that I served. It was this meeting with County Executive Sam Page, who was in the room with us, and it had all of the county council members, and we were trying to sort ideas that we wanted to sort of we were brainstorming ideas. And one of the issues that came up that really struck a resonance with most of us in the room was the topic of school shootings and the gun debate. Because as students, especially in recent years, we've had so many school shootings, and so it's not just a fictional thing for us. It's a reality that could happen at any moment. I mean, I can list off like 5 school shootings at least that I know that had a really big impact just from like this past 2 years alone. And so that's something that is really important to us, and I don't think they really necessarily understood how important that was to us until we spoke up and said something about it.
The reason that we're talking is the recognition that you received as a student journalist. But I am of the mind that you have been civically engaged, at least for the past 4 years, in that student journalism work. And then in this second year, you are serving as part of that St. Louis County Youth Advisory Council. But Elizabeth, how is it that you would say that you have been politically engaged as a person under age 18? You are 18 now.
Yes, I am 18.
And then you talked about not being able to cast a vote, right? What is it that civic participation, what has that meant to you as a youth?
So this actually goes back to a little bit of my family history. My parents and my grandparents it really starts back with my great-great-grandparents, but just for time's sake, we'll go with my grandparents. My grandfather was very active within the St. Louis scene. He was really involved with civil rights and the civil rights movement here and the labor rights movement. And so my dad has always been very politically active as well because he took that from his father. And because my dad took that from his father, then he passed that sort of down onto me. So I've been politically engaged since maybe the age of 9 when he took me to go work on the Hillary Clinton campaign. And so I was with them and I was doing all of that stuff, and I was just like right by his side during all of that. And so that sort of showed me how you could engage with the public and how it's so significant to be able to engage with the leaders around you. And so during that time, I met many local leaders and local community leaders. And it was just really awe-inspiring to me. And so that also served as sort of a factor of how I wanted to become a journalist, how I wanted to become engaged within the community later. I didn't know at that time, like 9 years old, 10 years old, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I did know that I wanted to do something.
So the future now, which is right in front of you, involves moving to another state. And that's because you will be attending Dillard University this fall. So how is it that your decision to go there, you've talked about your family history and what you have experienced as a teenager and someone who is now eligible to vote. How are those things all kind of wrapped up together insofar as your decision to go to an historically Black university?
Yeah, so my parents, they went to historically Black universities. My dad went to Morehouse College, and then my mom went to Norfolk State. So it's always been sort of an impression that I could too go to a HBCU and have a similar experience that they had. And I think attending an HBCU is really important to me because I didn't have a lot of Black representation growing up. So I didn't have a lot of Black teachers. I didn't have a lot of Black classmates who were actively within my classes. I had maybe 3 or so classes out of my entire high school career where I was not the only Black student in my classes. And so it just is an interesting thing to have, to be a minority in a classroom, and especially a Black person in a predominantly white environment. And so attending an HBCU which actively talks about culture, talks about the Black experience and Black history, that's something that's sort of been imprinted into my mind, and that's been a huge factor in my decision of where to go for college.
Mm-hmm. Your aspiration is to become a civil rights lawyer and not a journalist. So what is it that you think, this experience of student journalism in St. Louis County, how is that setting you up to pursue the career of your choice?
Yeah, so journalism is super fun, and I love being able to report on stories on issues that are important to me. And I'm not going to stop anytime soon. I'm definitely going to be getting involved as a student journalist in Dillard, at Dillard. And so I'm not stopping that anytime soon. But as for a career, I definitely feel like journalism has given me the resources and the skills to raise issues that are important to not just me, but to others as well, and being able to defend them and use them for the greater good.
Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
This episode was produced and edited by Ala Kouziz.
Recorded by Maya Norfleet.
Our audio engineer is Aaron Dorr. This podcast was mixed and edited by Aaron.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations, and leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thank you.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
The Gateway brings you the day's news each weekday from around the St. Louis region and the state capitals in Jefferson City.
Our schools are accredited. We don't need this bill.
And Springfield.
How many more years must pass before lawmakers see time is of the essence?
I'm Abby Larico. Join me each weekday for The Gateway on the STLPR app or wherever you get podcasts.